Good day, radio listeners. Welcome to this edition of the Pure Sex Radio broadcast. We're glad to have you here with us. My name is Jonathan, and we have some special guests with us from the North Houston area. We've got Bill and Lisa Royce. So, Bill and Lisa, thanks for being on the program.
Hi, yes.
Thanks. It's our honor.
Yeah, so before we get to Bill and Lisa's story, which is a really cool story, I love hearing it every time, I want to share with you listeners, as we do every now and then, that we are a listener-supported broadcast. That means that the way you're hearing us or seeing us, if you're on the camera, is through just generous partners, donors that have come alongside of us and decided to partner with us in ministry. And so if you'd like to learn about the ways that you can partner with us, just go to puresexradio.com and click on the donate link. So, Bill and Lisa, I would love for our listeners to just be able to get to know you. So we would love to hear your story, just of the things that you've been through in your marriage and how there's been restoration and just some amazing things that have happened. So why don't y'all just tell us your story?
Okay. Well, I'll let you.
You want me to go first?
You get started.
Okay.
Maybe I can chime in a little.
Well, the good news is I'd like to just announce and celebrate. We're about to celebrate 28 years of marriage, and
awesome.
So that's really exciting. And whenever we sit down with a couple to minister to them, we always say, your marriage journey is a journey. And, Bill and I were really young when we got married. I was in my early 20s. Both of us were brand new Christians, and I came from a background of being raised in an alcoholic family. I had been sexually abused growing up. And so I had a lot of brokenness that when I came to the Lord, I just kind of stuffed all of that. And we got married and we got thrown into serving in our local church and attending all of these great programs in church, and I didn't address some of the issues from my childhood and teenage years that contributed a lot to our dysfunction in our marriage relationship. So I had a history of a lot of promiscuity in my teen and early 20s before I started walking with the Lord, and didn't realize that was going to majorly affect our marriage relationship. And so we started having children as we got married, and homeschooled, and just got thrown into life with 3 children and being married and building a career and serving in church, and life was just so busy that my emotional needs, Bill's emotional needs, kind of just got put back on the back burner. And we realized very quickly that we were disconnecting from each other and growing further and further apart. And so we started having a lot of breakdowns in communication. We weren't resolving conflict very well, and both of us were medicating our pains in different ways. And I know Bill's going to talk about, his side of the story, but my side of the story is ultimately what happened is in our relationship, we got so far apart and we weren't able to meet either one of our needs. And I made a very selfish decision and went outside of our marriage and had an affair. And so it was in dealing with why I was doing that and me trying to understand what was going on in my own life that really just came to Bill and said, we are both really, really broken people and we need help. Mm-hmm. And our family was falling apart. And so that just really catapulted us on our respective healing journeys, which, Bill has been working on his recovery and I've been working on mine. And so that's where we are today is we're still going through, we're still healing, we're still growing, but we're in a much better place than we were.
Mm-hmm. And would you say you mentioned some things in your story that sound actually pretty common in a lot of marriages. Hey, breakdown of communication, kids come along and these career trajectory and all this kind of stuff. And so it's not as if your story is totally unique, right? In the sense of just those really normal challenges that come along. What is it about those challenges that are so challenging? Because it's kind of like you go into marriage with these kind of rose-colored glasses, right? Everybody has these expectations of the romance that you have in those early 20s and all of the sparks and all that kind of stuff, we have this false notion that will just perpetuate at the same level or even greater when we get married. And then, but what I'm hearing is you're saying, okay, there's normal stressors of now two people are living in the same space, and you've got then kids come along and work and just all these kinds of things. So what would you say were the things that, can you see some key delineation points that caused you guys to go towards some of those medicating behaviors? Because, I mean, everybody's got to deal with stress, right? Everybody's got to deal with, if they've got kids, they've got to deal with kids. Or if they've got a job, they got to deal with a job. So what was it, do you think, that were the factors that led to seeking some of those things outside the marriage for you, Lisa?
I think primarily it was all of my unresolved shame and guilt from my abuse and my history of promiscuity, and believing the lie that I needed to seek personal approval from other people, and I wasn't getting that in my marriage. And so I kind of defaulted to what I had learned growing up. Mm-hmm. And I'm certainly not excusing my behavior, but I really had to look at why I made that decision. It was a valid need. It was a valid need of being accepted and approved. It was how I filled the need that was sinful and ungodly and very destructive. And so for me personally, both of my parents have been married and divorced 3 times by the time I was a young adult. So I didn't have a healthy role model of what marriage should look like, number one. So as a young girl in her 20s, I just had a lot of false notions that Bill was going to be my savior. He was going to just take care of me and everything was going to be rosy and perfect. And we're Christians now. I just had this fantasy idea that it was all going to be fine. And I didn't know that sometimes you need to address and uncover some of the lies that you're believing in order to move forward and be successful and have healthy relationships. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, Bill, let's hear from you, because you got a story in this too, right?
Sure, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, Lisa was talking about the dysfunction of her youth growing up, and my background is equally as dysfunctional. However, it's on the opposite extreme of the spectrum. My family background would have appeared to be more of the beaver cleaver, leave it to beaver type family, kind of seemed to have it all together on the outside. People would look at us and think, hey, this family is really, really a close-knit family. They're pillars in the community. They're involved in community affairs, outreaches, and things like that. What wasn't noticeable, or what people didn't realize, is that anything that occurred in our family that would be perceived as not having it together was just swept under the rug. We lived a life of denial. Confrontation was just, if there was a confrontational issue, it just wasn't dealt with. It was just swept under the rug, and you moved on. You put that behind you, and supposedly it dealt with itself. But those things are always never laid to rest. If they're never dealt with, they're still alive. So that was the background I came from. So when her dysfunction and my dysfunction, we come together, and even though we're new Christians, born again, we're 2 dysfunctional people. We brought that all with us together. So learning how to deal with that was like one of the phases in our journey. But the thing that was also always there was the issue of pornography. Even once I got born again, I was exposed to it. I know your story, Jonathan, and mine's very similar in that respect. Being exposed to pornographic material at I think is somewhere around the age of 12, and it was my dad's, and it was in the house, and it was hidden, but you tend to be able to find those things, and so that was another issue that I struggled with for all of our marriage, from the day one. But it was hidden. Lisa didn't know about it until several years later. And then, we began to deal with that as well. So the question, to answer the question, the shame issue was also always something that kept us from dealing with our dysfunction and being able to move forward into the abundant life that the marriage should have.
Mm-hmm. Now, we talked a minute ago about how there's all these common stressors that were part of your early marriage that, everybody faces when they get married. What kind of knowledge did you have of each other's brokenness going into the marriage?
Great question. We didn't have any knowledge. And that's one thing that when we sit down and minister to couples, we talk about no secrets. Mm-hmm. I had secrets from Bill. I didn't tell him about my abuse, and I didn't fully disclose my level of promiscuity, prior to our relationship. And so, and again, most of that was as a result of shame. So I hid all that because I wanted him to think that I was this person that had it all together and that I was perfect now, that I'm a new creation, right? Mm-hmm. And he certainly didn't divulge his pornography addiction. And so when I found out about it 10 years into our marriage, I was devastated on one level, but then I was glad I found out on a second level because it helped me understand why we weren't connecting as a couple. Emotionally and intimately. There was just, I felt like there was always a wall there that I couldn't break through to really get to know him because he had this hidden life that he was keeping separate from me. And the shame is what stopped him from really intimately connecting with me and allowing himself to be known. And so
now
that was the first step.
In your experience so far with other couples, how common is it for you to see other couples have the same experience that you had in terms of being ignorant to each other's brokenness going into the marriage?
It's very common.
Yeah, it's almost 100%.
What do you think are? I mean, having dealt with some couples, what do you think are those factors? Why is there such disconnect or ignorance and unwillingness to, I mean, because could some of it be that there's fear, but could some of it also be that it just seems like, what's the point? How would that help to let anybody know about this?
It's in the past. I'm not doing those things anymore.
I can deal with it.
Or I can deal with it if I am doing them.
Or it's no longer some denial that is, like, for instance, when Lisa came and shared in her abuse as a child, I was so self-centered, and I had that, that Leave It to Beaver background where we didn't deal with confrontation or conflict. We just kind of let it, hit it. So when she told me that, I said, well, get over it. That's in the past. Let's just press forward and move forward.
We were young.
That didn't go so well, right? That's right. Not exactly.
It didn't go so well.
That is not the advice you give couples now, right?
So hopefully I've grown a little.
Yes, have.
Yeah, that's good because certainly we wouldn't want to give that advice to any couples right now. You don't just tell somebody about their abuse, get over it. It's in the past.
Yes.
But talking about your story, I want our listeners to hear more about what did redemption look like in your marriage, because I feel like we've sort of just jumped from all of this brokenness to now, hey, we've been married almost 28 years and things are great. It's like, whoa, wait a second. We need to know like what precipitated healing and what did redemption and reconciliation and restoration look like for you guys?
I'll share just a real quick. At least basically how the redemption began was probably just a little over 3 years ago. Lisa and our middle daughter, our youngest daughter, were looking for prom dresses on the internet. And like Lisa said, she found out about that I struggled with pornography about 10 years into our marriage. And they were, kind of isolated incidences. But, as the internet became more popular and more, prevalent and accessible, the pornography use grew and grew and grew, and then it got out of control. So 3 years ago, when they were looking for prom dresses, they were on the browser and the history browser, and they saw a list of all the porn sites. And gosh, that was so devastating for me to know that my daughter saw that. And Lisa confronted me, and I felt conviction at that moment like I'd never felt before, and pain, and I really finally recognized how much I had wounded Lisa. Well, began to understand it a little bit, and then to know that my daughter saw that too, and I had been preaching integrity to my daughters all these years. And the way I would describe integrity to them was not having nothing to hide and nothing to fear. In all these years, I've been, hiding my sex addiction, pornography use, and fearing that one day I'm going to get found out. Well, it did. And so when Lisa confronted me, I knew that at that moment that I'm going to have to do something extreme and something different, something I've never done before to overcome this. Because it really had become a stronghold. And, like I said earlier, I was in denial all these years that it was a stronghold.
Yeah.
I thought of it, a flaw, a weakness, something, that's a challenge, but I could overcome it.
Yeah.
But I realized I tried to overcome it on my own for all these years, and it never worked. So that's kind of a lead in, and if you want to jump in and add some more to it.
And I think once we hit that point of understanding that this really was serious, at least for Bill to understand that, for 15 years, we managed it together, just him and I. We were the only two that knew about his pornography usage. And there was a comfortableness in that because Bill was using me. I'll use that. It kind of sounds harsh, but I was his accountability partner, which that just really put a strain on our marriage relationship because that's not what the role of a wife is. And so once our daughter found out, it kind of took it to a whole nother level. And so I knew at that point that my brokenness was intertwined with his brokenness. And he certainly needed help, but I knew that if I didn't get healing for my stuff, that it was going to make it very challenging for him to get completely healed because the two become one. And so in this marriage relationship, if only he went and got healed and I didn't deal with all of my stuff, we weren't going to have the success that we both knew we needed. So Bill didn't know about the affair. It had ended, but I knew I needed to confess to him. So at that point I said, look, we need to take off the mask and just realize that we're living a hypocritical life. And I confessed to him what I had participated in and said, we need to go to the church, and we confessed to our leaders at church, our pastors, and really made ourselves accountable. And they helped us get counseling. They are the ones that put us in touch with you and Be Broken and Gateway to Freedom. And that's really what began our journey of recovery. So I went into counseling separate from Bill, and I've gone to some healing intensives for my own personal recovery, apart from what Bill has done with Be Broken and other things. And so that's put us on the path that we're on today. And what's been really neat is we've been open in sharing our story because we really believe that that's part of the healing journey, is confessing your sins one to another and praying for one another so that you can get healed. And so as we begin telling our story, couples start coming to us, right? And saying, we have secrets too, and we never told, want to tell. And so that's really what began this ministry of helping couples, marriage ministry, marriage mentoring, is just through telling our own story. And it's just evolved from that.
So what, because I think about then the challenges that you had mentioned about earlier in your marriage of just job and kids and communication and all those kinds of things. What has this process of restoration in your marriage and really pulling off the masks, like you said, what has then that been like in terms of redemption and transformation in all of those areas that previously were driving you guys apart? What has it been like in those areas in terms of work and kids and communication on the other side of pulling the masks off and really being transparent with one another?
Yeah. Well, the first thing we did was we sat down with our three daughters, and they're all older now, but they were old then. They're not. This isn't something I would advocate to do with young school age, but our girls were all in their late teens and early 20s at the time, and we sat down and confessed to them, what we had both been engaged in, and told them what we were going to do as far as healing, and that really started redeeming our family relationship, restoring all of the secrets and the hidden things in our family. And we saw some amazing things happen relationally with our girls. They were able to connect with Bill on a level that has just been so beautiful, because it was always just a disconnect even between them and their father because of what was going on that was hidden.
Yeah, even though it was hidden, there was still some kind of disconnect that it was bringing between the relationships with, all of them, each of the daughters, and between me and Lisa, there was that disconnect. And because I was connecting with the object, something that's intangible, instead of connecting with Lisa, the real thing. So once that transformation started happening, the connection between all of us and the growth and the unity, all began to come together. And there was a major shift, a major shift in our lives. We started looking at our marriage as a couple, instead of basically prior. We were living separate lives together.
What does it feel like now? Because you guys shared also about your histories of your own growing up, and you had brokenness that in your family that certainly manifest in different ways. But there was discord and disconnection in your families growing up. How does it feel to see how God has brought you to this point, that there is redemption, restoration, that you're by grace, you're writing new chapters for the future of your own family? I'd love to know how that feels emotionally for you guys.
It feels wonderful. It feels great. We have conversations now where we can When Bill grew up, the message he received was, don't share your feelings, don't talk about what's going on internally with you.
If you disagree.
If you disagree. So we never were able to communicate, and now we can communicate, we can share our dreams. Once you move shame out of the way, I actually just finished writing and self-published, Jonathan, an interactive Bible study on shame and how to break up with shame. So it feels so good to have shame out of the way, so that now Bill and I can connect. We were never able to connect because there was always this third thing in our marriage. And now we can talk, we can share dreams, and we've learned to really celebrate one another instead of tolerate one another. And we learned some great marriage tools. We took some classes on communication and conflict resolution, because those are skills that we need, that we didn't have.
Yeah, and this experience has allowed us to be able to share with others that there is hope.
Yes.
Yes, that with God you can overcome any obstacle that is trying to hold you back or drag you down.
Yeah.
And,
now for our listeners, you guys don't have it all together yet, though, right? I mean,
No.
you have. So I'm always careful to paint this picture where I don't want any of our listeners or people to go, "Oh, great! It's this perfect couple that has no problems now and everything." So what does it look like now when some of those old things, like shame, like just fear or whatever else, want to creep in to start creating division? I mean, what's that look like now for you guys in terms of dealing with that? Because those are real factors, right? I mean, there's a very real enemy that wants to make sure that not only that you don't get well, but that you don't help others. And he would love to see there be now a scandal where all of a sudden it's in the newspapers that Bill's looking at porn again, or that Lisa had another affair. You know what I mean? There's this.
Sure.
There's real attacks that come.
Well, it's real.
And what's
It's
it look
very
like?
real.
What's it look like to deal with those now versus before?
Well,
I hope we didn't come across as thinking that we
No,
had it
no,
all
no.
together.
I was joking with you.
we've put,
So, hopefully, if we're walking in the Spirit, we will recognize that the enemy is working to come and divide us again, or he's always trying to divide us. And so, knowing, we have learned to know that Satan is out there, and he wants to separate us more than anything else. Because once he can gets the family separated, he kind of has control of the culture and the society.
But I think, too, practically, we've put things in place that we really encourage other couples to do. So Bill still has his accountability partners, and he still has men in his life that hold him accountable, especially like I've been traveling a lot and speaking, and I'm about to go out of town for a couple of weeks, and he knows, and his accountability partners know, and they call and check on him. And so we understand now triggers and potential stressors, and we have a plan. So when those things do happen, because they will happen, we have a plan in place, and we have people surrounding us, community surrounding us that will help us, because it is when you start thinking you've arrived or that you're healed, that's when you're going to slip and fall. And so we are constantly acknowledging the fact that we have not arrived, that we're still on this healing journey. And I love how you, Jonathan, have taught us this, that it's a minimum of 3 to 5 years of a journey. Mm-hmm. And I remind myself of that daily, because sometimes I get frustrated that Bill's not farther along, or I'm not further along in my journey. And I remember your words, okay, we're just in year 3. We still got at least 2 more to go before we can really maybe even press through that wall that I sometimes see, because it is easy to default back to your old patterns and your old habits. And
so
we read a lot. We stay up to date with reading materials and watching videos and listening to your podcast.
We're intentional about those things,
growing.
Because we don't want to be naive and think that we do have it all together. So I'm intentional about going through certain books that have to deal with the addictions and strongholds, and in addition to just studying the Bible on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we're about out of time, but what I'd love to do is I'd love to have you guys back again so that we can kind of unpack some of these tools and the plan for couples. But before we finish up, can you tell our listeners how they can get information about your ministry and connect with you guys?
Yes, they can go to powerofhislove.com. We started a website really just to offer hope and resources for people, for couples mainly, that are struggling with this. And so we have articles that you can read. We have a couple of resources you can download, or you can purchase the Bible study on shame that I just finished. And so we would love to hear your stories, your questions. We really believe that God's called us to help and support couples that are going through this journey, so that they don't believe that they're alone. Mm-hmm. There's a community out there that wants to help.
Well, thanks, Bill and Lisa, for being with us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And listeners, we're always glad that you're with us, and we look forward to having you back here again next week on the Pure Sex Radio broadcast.